Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
In the squadron, they called him Bullets, but we call him Greg Kelly. Greg Kelly is on the air on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak, filling in for the great Greg Kelly, my friend. I've known him for years. And let's talk a little bit more about this breaking news that's just come out. Kristi Noem no longer, well, as of March 31st, no longer will be the Secretary of the Homeland Security Department. She has been under so much scrutiny, so much pressure for quite some time. A lot of people outside of even just the usual critics of the Trump administration and the Trump policies, a lot of people from within MAGA world, if you want to call it that, have not liked the way that she has been the face of and the voice of the border security campaign. More importantly, not really loved the way that she's backed up ICE, at least publicly. No doubts that she was in supportive of the policies. There wasn't anyone saying she was wishy-washy about it. They just didn't think she was being very effective. So I'm going to quote some of President Trump's announcement, which he just put on his Truth social media platform. Quote, "I am pleased to announce that the highly respected United States Senator from the great state of Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin, will become the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security effective March 31st. The current Secretary, Kristi Noem, who has served us well and has had numerous and spectacular results, especially on the border, will be moving to be Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas, our new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere we are announcing on Saturday in Doral, Florida. I thank Kristi for her service at Homeland." Kristi Noem, in addition to all that criticism she was getting from inside MAGA world, also involved in what looked like a personal scandal. There's been a lot of reporting about whatever kind of a relationship she has with Corey Lewandowski and how he's traveling with her as part of DHS, and on down the line. This is actually a pretty important lesson for people who want to be very, very front and center within this administration because they have post-2027, post-2028 ambitions. When this administration began, there were 3 people in the group, in the cabinet, who were clearly the best candidates, at least from a betting standpoint, I'm not saying from the strength standpoint, to be candidates for president. J.D. Vance, of course, our current vice president, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and in a distant third, but she was one of the ones in there, Kristi Noem. A lot of people thought she's probably going to end up trying to be someone's running mate, probably doesn't have enough juice to be the actual nominee in 2028. But you know how these things go. You hang around and maybe the top nominees fall for whatever reason. Well, she's the one who has kind of fallen out. I don't think that she's going to be a serious contender now in 2028 if that's what she was planning to do. So now that really is an important lesson for J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. Now, the first lesson to learn about anyone running for president is you don't want to be the front runner too soon. And too soon is really almost the entire time, the entire election cycle. Our election cycles now run 4 years, sadly, with all the fundraising you have to do, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is, if you're a front runner now forget about it. I mean, your chances of winning the election or winning the nomination are almost zero. Because the longer you're a front runner, the longer there's a bullseye on your back, and people will find stuff to cut you down. You don't really want to be a front runner. This is now 2026. You don't want to be a front runner until about 2 years from now. March of 2028, March of the actual general election. That's when you want to start being a front runner. No sooner. And you can ask all the Howard Deans and the George H.W. Bushes back in 1980. There's plenty of evidence to back me up on this. And I promise you that no matter what mistakes Kristi Noem has made as DHS secretary, a lot of this would have been ignored. A lot of this would have been swept under the rug if it hadn't been for the fact that she seemed like she was interested in running for president in 2028. There were people talking about this. You may not remember because it's been a little while, but that's the case. You show your cards on that, and you're effectively putting a bullseye on your back. So that's the breaking news right now. Kristi Noem out. Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma, he's a sitting senator. Oklahoma is a very, very safe red state. You never know what could happen, but whatever happens in the special election to replace him, his term is not up until 2028. So they're going to have a special election, and we'll see where that goes. I assume that's a very safe state. Again, you never know what happens, but Oklahoma, of all the states out there, that's not the one where you expect to see the Democrats pick off a Republican seat. So that's your breaking news. At about 20 minutes after the hour, I have another piece of what I consider to be even bigger breaking news than this, also coming out of basically the Senate. Huge breaking news from Ken Paxton, which I consider to be one of the most interesting political gambits I've ever seen. This is just breaking today, and at about 20 minutes after the hour, you're going to hear 21, 22 minutes after the hour. Got to stick around for that. Let's get you, though, updated on what I was just talking about with James Flippin, and, of course, our real, of course, rolling number one story throughout the world, which is, of course, the U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran. Obviously, we care about the machinations inside this administration and a lot of other stories and the political campaigns of 2026. But we have hundreds of thousands of American troops in harm's way, and that has to be your lead story. News directors out there in both the mainstream media and even some of the right-wing media. This has to be your top story always. So let's get you updated on some of the things. Again, some of them I just talked to James about. I think it's quite significant that we're seeing videos now confirmed of major explosions destroying, or at least certainly hitting, the underground missile facilities that the Iranians have in their country, and most notably the Demavand facility, which has a massive amount of missiles. This is an underground facility. It takes bunker buster type bombs to hit this, which means that the U.S. forces had to wait a little while before they could deliver that kind of ordnance. The B-2 bombers and the other types of bombers that deliver those kinds of heavy bombs, they're sitting ducks in the sky if they're dealing with a nation that has any kind of anti-aircraft infrastructure still left working. Iran doesn't anymore. They probably didn't at the start of the war either, but you can't take that chance. Can't take the chance of a B-52 getting shot down or something like that. So they waited a couple days, but now they're hitting that facility, and I think that is a major, major development. Now, on the ground in Iran, in the urban areas, the other major development that really needs to be spoken about, because this is going to be something that is going to be used in the propaganda war against the United States and Israel, you can bet. But we are getting increasing reports and videos proving that regime forces, IRGC killers, the same people who killed all those protesters at the end of last year and into this year, are increasingly using mosques and schools, not just to hide out, but to stage attacks. You see snipers on top of mosques all over the major cities of Iran. And they are going to use this as, not only because it's strategic, the mosques in Muslim countries tend to be the tallest buildings, so it kind of gives them the higher ground. But of course, the real reason why they're using the mosques and schools is they believe that will make them immune from the U.S. and Israeli attacks who don't want to attack those kinds of typically sensitive civilian areas. But there are a lot of resistance spokespeople, people who are outside of Iran, people inside of Iran, urging the U.S. and Israel not to stop hitting those areas, to actually go after them, because that is where a lot of the attacks and the weapons are being stored. So I guess consequently, maybe Israel and the United States want to warn Iranian civilians to stay away from the mosques and the schools right now, because if the IRGC and these kinds of killers are using that as a staging location, then all bets should be off. By the way, attacking someone from a civilian site like a mosque, a hospital, or school is a double war crime. If you attack civilians, that's a war crime. If you attack them from behind the shield of a civilian area, like a hospital, school, or mosque, that's another war crime. And if this all sounds familiar to you, it should. This is what Hamas has been doing in Gaza for many, many years. And not coincidentally, Hamas has been supported by Iran for many, many years as well. So that is another major development in this war. Now, in the wider war, which won't directly affect the United States, but will come darn close, Israel has told, speaking of evacuation orders, Israel has told the entire civilian population of much of southern Lebanon to get the heck out. Israel cannot risk having Hezbollah, which operates in southern Lebanon, however diminished it is, as you know, Operation Grim Beeper, when all those top-level people and attackers in Hezbollah were taken out when their beepers exploded. Israel has taken out a lot of Hezbollah's infrastructure in other ways. Nevertheless, Hezbollah is still a threat to make it a multi-front war in a serious way, not just in the indiscriminate shooting of missiles like Iran is doing all over the region. So Israel, those people now under an evacuation order, and the people, and this is an interesting development here. As some of these people are getting out of southern Lebanon, it's so well known to the wider population of Lebanon who are the Shia, who are the Hezbollah supporters, who are the people who are the family members of the Hezbollah leaders who are trying to get out, that some of the towns they're going to in hopes of hiding out are not accepting them. They're saying, get the heck out. You're an Iranian supporter. We don't want you. Interesting little Lebanese community development going on there. So that's another major development. Now, here in the United States, I think we also have a major development in that the stock markets are reacting very, very negatively today to the rise in oil prices. We right now, as I'm speaking to you now, the Dow is down more than 1,000 points. We're looking at the price of U.S. Light sweet crude oil of $6. We are now at the $80 level. And now, again, oil trading in its serious volume ends at about 15 minutes. It still goes on after 2:30 Eastern time. I just want to make sure you know that there is some trading, but that's kind of like futures trading. But as we get down to the close of major trading of oil futures here in the United States, we're getting darn close to $81 a barrel, which is, listen, we were at $59 a barrel at one point in early February, or certainly in January. So that's a significant jump. But don't forget, under President Biden in 2022, we were at $126 a barrel oil. So we really have a long way to go. We're 50% down from that number. So, 33% down from that number. So honestly, we're not there yet. I actually think, don't want to give you too much investment advice, but you might want to short oil futures, because if this war ends in 3-4 weeks, you're going to see a major, major drop in the price of oil. But this, of course, is affecting the markets. This is the biggest thing affecting the markets. It's the oil price. It's an inverse relationship. As the oil prices go up, the stock indexes are going to go down, and that's the way that's going to move. All right, so that gets you all basically updated. I just want to, again, I'm Jake Novak in for Greg Kelly here, the last hour of the Greg Kelly Show. Breaking news at the top of the hour. Kristi Noem is out at the Department of Homeland Security. Was she fired? Probably. Obviously, we're never going to get full confirmation of that, or at least not right away. But it does seem like she was forcibly replaced. She's being put on some kind of new initiative by the Trump administration, which is not a cabinet-level thing. It's definitely a demotion. And she's going to be replaced by Mark Wayne Mullen, or at least that's who the president wants to replace. We'll see. I'm sure that usually a sitting senator breezes through confirmation. So I'm going to make a not too bold prediction and say that's probably going to happen pretty easily. Mark Wayne Mullen. And of course, I've just given you the updates. I think the big updates, there's a lot more, but there's a big updates going on in what's happening in the Iran war, which is still the rolling number one story, not just for the United States, but globally. When we come back here on the Greg Kelly Show, I'm Jake Novak filling in for Greg Kelly. Want to get you up to date on the outrageous statement of the day, and maybe his most ever, from Tucker Carlson, and why it's so important that we pay attention to this. Thanks for listening. We're going to be right back. And don't forget that huge, huge news from Ken Paxton. Huge news in American politics. I'll have that for you, too, when we come back.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Greg Kelly on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak here, in for my friend Greg Kelly for this last hour of the Greg Kelly Show. I got to get right to what I consider to be even bigger news than the Kristi Noem story. In case you just joined us, she is out at DHS. President Trump has named Senator Markwayne Mullin as his choice to replace her. This, to me, is even bigger. Ken Paxton, who just came in second and is going to a runoff Senate primary election against John Cornyn for the Republican Party in Texas, lost by a hair. And I say by lost, I mean he came in second. There's no losers in the first round. He made it to the second round. But he has just made what I consider to be one of the most interesting and I think pretty smart political gambits I've ever seen. He has just made a statement saying to John Cornyn that if John Cornyn commits to passing the SAVE Act, that's that bill that will require voters to show proof of citizenship and picture ID, legal ID before they can vote, that he will he's using the term consider dropping out of the race, of the primary, even though I think Kevin Paxton would beat John Cornyn right now. Remember, while he did come in second by a hair, the third candidate in that initial primary on Tuesday, Wesley Hunt, got more than 13% of the vote, almost all of which I think will go to Ken Paxton. These were people who were voting against Cornyn. So I think Paxton would have been the favorite, at least in my opinion. But here's what I think's happening here. Ken Paxton doesn't think John Cornyn's going to do it. And this is a great way to remind all the Texas Republican voters that the thing that they are really now making their number one priority legislatively, I would think our number one priority is the safety of our troops overseas, but that isn't something that we can vote on right yet. But the number one priority other than that is to get this Save America Act passed and get Trump to sign it, which he is eager to do. And if John Cornyn doesn't do this, and Paxton is betting he won't, this will put him very much behind the eight ball in this primary. Now, if he suddenly decides to do it, two things will happen. One is I think he'll win easily. He'll be up against James Tallarico in the Democrat primary, who won the Democrat primary, who in the hour since he won the primary, a bunch of his past has come to light, including some wackadoodle statements that even by Texas Democrat standards is really crazy, including claiming that white people couldn't get COVID. He's all over the place. I know a lot of people are focusing on his abortion comments, but I think you should focus on the white people can't get COVID thing. I think that would be more upsetting to people who had loved ones die. But anyway, it's going to be a walk in the park for the Republicans. There's a great pumpkin every few years. I call it the great pumpkin of Democrat politics and liberalism in America. Every few years in Texas, they find a Democrat who gets nominated, usually for Senate, sometimes for governor, and they make them into national celebrities. Beto O'Rourke is the best example, and he did make it close in 2018 against Ted Cruz. But that's as good as they can say. All the other ones lose by double digits, whether in 1996 against Phil Gramm, in 2002 against Phil Gramm. In 2002, it was Ron Kirk. In 1996, they ran a Latino candidate who had been a Vietnam veteran. Both of them lost by double digits. They do this all the time, and they'll try to do it with Tallarico, but it's not going to work. Anyway, I think this is a major, major, major development, my friends, for Ken Paxton. This, to me, I'm not a fan of political consultants, and so this tells me it isn't the political consultancy firm that's working with Paxton, if there is one, that came up with this. This is all Ken Paxton. This is a very, very interesting strategic move. Either Cornyn says no or hems and haws about it, and suddenly the number one legislative issue for every Republican, especially Trump supporter in America, becomes something that's a huge liability for Cornyn. He could try to play defense. He could try to run out the clock. He could try to filibuster on this, no pun intended, instead of actually having a filibuster on this law, and sort of try to get people to ignore it. But now Paxton has created a tremendous gambit here. Cornyn either says, yes, I will commit to getting the Save America Act passed, or he hems and haws, and it becomes clear that he's not down with the number one legislative priority for the voters who just voted in that primary. Pretty smart. Pretty smart from Ken Paxton, even though I think he wins this thing anyway. But this, to me, is a tremendous... this is a smart move. This is how you get people to talk about the issues that you want to talk about. Well, speaking of gambits, when we come back, I'm going to talk about another gambit that another candidate for higher office, his name is Gavin Newsom, has just decided to play. And here's a spoiler alert. It's not as smart as Ken Paxton's. And by the way, folks, if you want to make it all about the Jews when it comes to the Iran war, let's make it all about the Jews. But you're not going to like where I'm going with this. You're going to be educated and maybe a little even embarrassed. Greg Kelly Show. I'm Jake Novak in for Greg Kelly. We'll be right back.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak in for my friend Greg Kelly here. Just want to get you updated on the main breaking stories just in the last hour or so. Hope you caught it, but if you're just joining us, Kristi Noem out as the secretary at DHS. She's going to be replaced, at least President Trump wants to replace her, pending Senate approval, with Mark Wayne Mullen, a sitting U.S. senator. For those of you who know how those things go, the Senate rarely votes down sitting members of the Senate for cabinet positions, so probably going to happen. She's out, and that's a big story. Another big development, the B-52 bombers, and similar to B-52 bombers that the U.S., and only the U.S. has, Israel doesn't have those, clearly now operating inside Iran. We're seeing major explosions at one of the big underground missile facilities there, bunker buster type stuff that only the U.S. can deliver. That's a new phase in this war right now. And another new phase in this war, for those of you waiting for the big uprising of the people in Iran to kind of take advantage of this opportunity, not so easy. We're increasing reports of IRGC and other regime killers using mosques and schools as staging areas and as bases, which may change the list of potential targets going on in that war. A major controversy developing, and rightfully so, due to the latest Tucker Carlson podcast, where Tucker's been saying some kooky stuff for quite some time now. So much so that I think that people who love the man, if there are any people who love the man, should really start thinking about getting him some help. And I really don't mean that as a joke. I really don't. I've had enough experience with people who have gone through this kind of thing to know it's not a joke. But anyway, that aside, now he's really crossed into real kooky territory. Here's who he's blaming for the war in Iran now. Check it out. This is cut one.
Well, there are a lot of ways it happened. The main way it happened is because no one in the United States noticed, because it's such a secular place. And as noted, we have eyes but can't see and ears and can't hear. But this has been going on a long time in public through, in part, the efforts of a group called Chabad, Chabad. And you may know people who give money to Chabad or run Chabad, super nice people, engaged in all kinds of charitable activities, drug rehab. You know, there's a lot about Chabad that's really good. But what is Chabad exactly? Well, Chabad, you can look it up, is a very old organization, about 250 years old. And it's a branch of Hasidic Judaism. It's an organization that was overseen for many years by a guy called Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was famously in Brooklyn, considered the Messiah by some of his followers, who was a friend of presidents, or certainly someone presidents visited. He was a very powerful man in the Orthodox and the Hasidic community. And he was the overseer of Chabad, which predated him and outlasted him, but he was its most visible ambassador. And Chabad has been pushing in a pretty subtle way, unless you look carefully, for the reconstruction of the Third Temple.
All right, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, every Jew who actually prays the codified liturgy of the Jewish people for more than 2,000 years has been praying for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem for, 2,000 years, you incredible ignoramus. And this is what happens when you get someone with a 1.9 GPA from Trinity College who wore a bow tie for a long time and people assumed he was educated. Not so much. Not that I'm the most educated person about every little faction within Islam or other religions, but that's the thing. I'm not doing a podcast about them or blaming them for a particular war. Chabad Lubavitch, why did he target them? Why did he target them? Because he half described some of the things that they do. Yes, they're very involved in charity work. What Chabad really does mostly is make it possible to live as a Jew anywhere in the world. You need a place to find kosher food. You need a place to find Jewish services on the Sabbath and on other holidays. You will likely find them through Chabad, especially the further away you get from major population centers, which I think is the most positive thing they've done, period. But because they're so public in the things that they do, they're the ones who drive around with the candelabra, the menorah on top of their cars on the LIE or on the 5 or 10 expressway on LA during Hanukkah. They're the ones who have the big public celebrations. They're the ones who walk around on the streets of especially large Jewish population areas and ask people if they're Jewish and have they prayed today. In other words, they're the most visibly Jewish people in America because not only do they dress a certain way that you know they're Jewish, but they're out and about. You know, you can blame the Jews all you want, and it can be in countries like certain Asian countries where there literally are no Jews. After the end of World War II, when the Jewish populations of Eastern Europe, for example, were almost completely eradicated, they also used to blame the Jews a lot, but it didn't lead to a lot of violence or any violence because there weren't any Jews to beat up or find. But when you go after Chabad, also known as Lubavitch Hasidim, you're going after the most visible and out there Jews you can find. I don't know how many people walking down the street will be able to identify me as a Jew. I don't know how many people will be able to identify other people as Jews. They might be Italians. They might be some other, Jews come in all shapes and sizes and colors. A lot of dark-skinned black Jews all over the world, especially in Israel now coming from Ethiopia. It's hard to identify who's a Jew and who's not. Some people play that game, but honestly, Chabad Lubavitch, that's an easy one. To say this is irresponsible and scary is an understatement. And I don't know what's going on with this guy, but to say that they somehow are responsible for the Iran war because they're trying to create the third temple in Jerusalem, something that every devout Jew has been praying for at least 3 times a day for over 2,000 years. This is part of the Jewish belief. We're hoping for the Messiah to come, and we're hoping for the rebuilding of our temple in Jerusalem. That's what Jews have been praying for ever since the second temple was destroyed in the year 70. So what's that? 2,000 and, 56 years? Long time. Or 1,956 years? I guess 1,900. A long time. That's my quick math. I mean, this is really scary stuff. And sad. Chabad Lubavitch has no such grand influence in such a way that they could get a war started. Could they get a local councilman elected somewhere in Brooklyn? Sure. That's about as far as their political influence goes. And when politicians want to appear to be friendly with the Jewish community, they can appear at a Chabad event. Sure, that plays a role. They don't make big political donations. They want you to donate to them. Like the old joke, we were so poor, guy broke into our house, we robbed him. They want you to donate to them. They don't make political donations. They don't wield their money anywhere other than for their own operations. Oh my goodness, it's really sad to see this. Now, I was talking about political gambits before the break, this incredible political gambit from Ken Paxton, running for Senate in the state of Texas. But he says, just to reiterate this breaking story, Ken Paxton says he will drop out of the runoff election, or at least he will consider doing so, if John Cornyn, the guy he's up against in the Republican runoff primary, will commit and promise to try to get the Save America Act passed in the Senate. I think Paxton knows that Cornyn won't take it. He won't do that. And in so doing, whether you like this bill or not, I had a listener text me or post on X saying, "Oh, it's not a good bill." That's not what I'm arguing right now. I'm arguing here the facts. The facts is that an overwhelming number of Republican voters and Democrat voters like this idea of voter ID and proof of citizenship. And this has become the number one legislative issue for all of MAGA world. Again, I believe the number one issue is actually the safety of our troops now fighting in Iran. But the number one legislative issue by far, this is the absolute number one domestic issue for them, for sure. And if Cornyn doesn't take this offer from Paxton and say, yes, I will do that, sure, because I don't think he will, then that's a huge, huge leg up for Ken Paxton, who I think would probably have won the runoff anyway, now that third-party candidate who mostly stole votes from him is out, Wesley Hunt, because Runoffs are about eliminating some of the field, and they eliminated him. But this is a really smart gambit because at the very least, this gets this issue out front and center, and a lot of people will ask the question, wait a minute, even if John Cornyn takes this opportunity from Ken Paxton, why wasn't he doing this already? He's the senator. Paxton's the guy running for the Senate. Why aren't enough Republicans like John Cornyn not making this a priority at all? And that creates the issue in the election that Paxton wants people talking about, an issue that MAGA world really wants, and pretty much almost all of America really wants, a tremendous amount of America wants, and it puts Cornyn on the back foot. He's going to have to explain why he hasn't already made this a major, major priority for himself. So that, to me, I think is a really smart gambit. I don't often praise political gambits. They're usually grandstanding and annoying, and I don't think they're effective. Sure, this is grandstanding. Got to get publicity. So what Paxton is doing is a form of grandstanding. Sure, fine. But I think it's actually quite an effective move strategically. But somebody else right now, just in the last couple of days, has also decided to play a very, very brash political gambit, and that would be Gavin Newsom, who is not following my advice and is looking to be the front runner in the Democrat nomination race for 2028 for president. And he's decided to put his money on an interesting new horse. It's a similar horse that Tucker Carlson is on right now. Let's hear what Gavin Newsom has to say about why we're involved in this war in Iran.
And a lot of Democrats have looked at the Netanyahu regime and felt like, you know what, we don't like the trajectory he's on. It's time to rethink the U.S. relationship with Israel, especially military support.
Well,
where do you
Bibi's
stand?
making that easy right now. Let's talk about that. But the issue of Bibi's interesting because he's got his own domestic issues. He's trying to stay out of jail. He's got an election coming up. He's potentially on the ropes. He's got folks, the hard line, that want to annex the West Bank. I mean, Freeman and others are talking about it appropriately, sort of an apartheid state. They couldn't even, we're talking about regime change. For 2 years, they haven't even been able to solve the Hamas question in Israel. So this is, I want to be careful here, but, in so many ways, that influence in the context of the conversation of where Trump ultimately landed on this is pretty damn self-evident.
Words from another uneducated person in Gavin Newsom. I could break down about 16 falsehoods and misrepresentations in that soundbite alone. First of all, there's always an election in Israel. He's got an election coming up. There's always an election in Israel, and Netanyahu has won the overwhelming majority of them. This is a man who has been the prime minister of Israel for most of the last 31 years. The state of Israel isn't even 80 years old yet, and Netanyahu has been the prime minister for about a third of the entire history of the state of Israel. So he's won a lot of elections, folks. Despite all the attacks on him. He's trying to stay out of jail. For what? For taking some cigars? The absurdity of the lawfare against Benjamin Netanyahu, which was, by the way, the testing ground for the absurd lawfare against Donald Trump, by the way. Absolutely the same playbook and some of the same people working on those strategies, by the way. The absurdity of the lawfare against Netanyahu in Israel has now been completely exposed. In fact, just today, President Trump once again urging the president of Israel, who has pardoning powers, Chaim Herzog, to pardon Netanyahu and get this nonsense out of the way. And Herzog saying, he'll consider it later. He's not going to do it, probably. But anyway, that's one thing. Second thing is the Netanyahu regime. Regime is the term that we use for unelected dictatorships. This is not only a democratically elected leader of a country, but one who constantly has to get democratically elected. He's gone through so many elections, I've lost count. He first became the prime minister in 1996. He lost in an election in 99, came back in 2009, had a brief period in 2021 when he wasn't prime minister, got back again because he had another election. There's always an election in Israel. And then the comment that they haven't been able to solve the Hamas problem. Well, they defeated Hamas militarily. They just got to figure out a way to keep them from coming back. And for that, they're going to need some other help from around the world, hopefully not American military help, and doesn't look like that's in the cards, so that's good. But here's what I want everyone to understand Gavin Newsom just did. What did he just do? Now, if Gavin Newsom is going to demonize Israel to to say that they're the reasons, and Netanyahu, they're the reasons why we're in this war in Iran, what has to happen for that to sting? It doesn't hurt if we win this war, if the United States completes this war within 3, 4, 5 weeks. So then it's like a big deal. They got us into a war, and we got rid of a really bad country, and we're back home with minimal damage. No, Gavin Newsom now is openly rooting for us to lose this war, because otherwise this accusation is ludicrous. Who cares? This is a man, sitting governor of our most populated state in this country, rooting for American troops to die, rooting for us to lose a war so that he can overcome his biggest problem, by the way. His biggest problem as a Democrat candidate, he actually has 2 huge problems. He's white and he's a male. And he's hoping that playing the anti-Semitism card will somehow get him back in the good graces of the far left of the Democrat Party. Don't know if that's going to work, but it only works if America loses this war. So shame on Gavin Newsom. We'll be right back on the Greg Kelly Show. I'm Jake Novak filling in for him, and I have some updates for you on the Savannah Guthrie situation, which may surprise you. We'll be back with that when you come right back.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak filling in on this last hour of the Greg Kelly Show. Thanks so much for letting me fill in. And I just want to get you updated on, again, so much breaking news happened, and this is important breaking news that people should be following. Again, if you're just joining us, Kristi Noem out as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Probably fired. Of course, we won't get that official term used. She's being reassigned to some new special project the Trump administration is looking at. Markwayne Mullin, one of the current senators. Of course, we have 2 senators from every state. Remember your high school or hopefully junior high or elementary school civics. Markwayne Mullin, a Republican from Oklahoma senator, President Trump's choice to replace her. Remember, he is a sitting senator, so the chances of the Senate not confirming him almost nil. That almost never happens, so it's usually a safe bet. And, of course, he's choosing a guy in a very deep red state of Oklahoma, so the chances of a Democrat getting that spot in a special election or something like that, not very likely. So that's the most immediate breaking news. But I think the most important breaking news is the continuing coverage of continuing events going on in Iran right now. It looks like the heavy B-52 bunker buster type bombing has begun in certain areas of Iran, including one very important underground missile cache. That's been hit clearly by American forces. You may know the Israelis don't have those kinds of heavy bombers. They have fighter jets that can do a lot of damage, but they don't have B-52s and that kind of thing. That's an American op all the way. So there's that. May have been that target, as I say, may have been lit or painted by Israeli intelligence, but it's definitely an American operation. So that is another development going on right now. The Dow Jones is selling off. We're at 1,100 points down last time I checked just a moment ago. That's entirely because of oil prices also spiking. The regular trading session for U.S. crude ended with oil prices indeed going over the $81 a barrel level, which is still a good more than 10% lower than where we were before the October 7th attacks, by the way, back in 2023. And a lot lower than where we were in the middle of 2022 under Joe Biden when we were at $126 a barrel. So there's room to move here. But I'll tell you something. If this war wraps up in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks even, and that oil gets on the market without a problem and the threat to shipping is removed, you're going to see a very steep drop in oil overnight. So be careful. If you're looking at putting your retirement money all on oil, be ready to pull it out real fast. That's all I can tell you. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, but if I were, that's what I would tell you. Interesting development, and I hope a lesson learned in the whole Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie case. No, there's no new breaks in the case. Sorry to say. And again, whatever we feel about the mainstream media and someone who's a host of a Today Show like Savannah Guthrie, of course, we are certainly all wishing for a good conclusion to this story, although it's been a long time now. It's been more than a month since Nancy Guthrie disappeared, very much presumed abducted. That $1 million reward is still out there. Savannah Guthrie visited the Today Show for the first time since all this happened, and NBC has confirmed she will eventually return to the show. Here's my wish. Coming from someone who worked in local news for 6 years. Spoiler alert. Local news is all about crime, fires, horrible stories like this. And the Today Show, even though it's a national program, is essentially like a local news program. It's stories about school shootings. It's stories about things that worry the moms and dads getting their kids out to school in the morning. It's very family-oriented type thing. And a lot of times when you work in a news organization, whether it's local or national, where that's the top kind of story, where crime and fires and school abductions and whatever you want to call it, you start to get desensitized to it, to the level of, I could tell you some naughty stories about people who I work with in local news, families that had just learned that a child had died, and they, instead of giving them their privacy, left a hidden mic somewhere in the living room so they could put their crying and shouting on the air. Reporters who take the picture of a child when the child is missing or being killed so that we can put it on the air and then never return it. Things like that. I'm not saying Savannah Guthrie was ever guilty of anything like that in her career, but maybe if she's going to return to her job before this story is resolved, and even if it is resolved, maybe she can bring some real guidance and wisdom into what it's like to be the focus of a story like this. One of the first things I told all my relatives when I started in local news a long time ago, 1994 to be exact, was never talk to a local news reporter, ever. Because it's just not going to end up great for you. They'll either exploit your pain or maybe even misconstrue what you tried to say. Savannah Guthrie has that opportunity to tell that to her staff at the Today Show the next time they try to do that. It's something that local news does, and the Today Show is a glorified local news program. I'm Jake Novak. I've been filling in for Greg Kelly for this last hour of his show. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to The Greg Kelly Show. You can hear The Greg Kelly Show weekdays at 12:15 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.